Hey guys, today I want to talk about Muradin, particularly why the pros play Muradin. I'm going to show you guys the builds that Muradin is using in Pro Play by using MasterLeague.net. And the interesting thing about this is Muradin sees very few patch changes, and he's been one of the most consistent people in this meta and in many different metas. In fact, Muradin has been sitting around a 50% popularity and a 50% win rate over the last 3 tournaments, over the last year. It is incredible how consistent Muradin is, and he fits in so many team cons and has played a decent amount of times. I actually really love where Muradin's at right now, and a lot of people do as well. He fits into a lot of team comps because he brings a lot to the table. He's a main tank who can initiate by stunning people, jumping in and stunning. He can jump over walls, which makes him fit in a lot of different maps, as well as he's decent for peeling because he can get in the back line, stun people, as well as reducing their attack speed if needed. And he synergizes well with other tanks, as well as he's decent even on his own. Which is why overall, I think Muradin's played a ton in Pro Play, and I want to show you guys some synergies that he has with a lot of his abilities. To start off, you'll see that there's some synergies with Third Wind as well as with Stone Form. There's some synergies with Thunderburn as well as with his Healing Static, and his Healing Static with his Avatar. Let's talk about these for a little bit. To start off, Stone Form, you can activate to heal Muradin for 30% of his maximum health over 10 seconds. Second Wind is disabled during this time. Now, 30% of his maximum health can be increased with his Avatar because he would have more maximum health. Level 13, you get Healing Static. You heal for 5% of his max health for each hero hit by Thunderclap. Again, 5% of his max health. His max health is increased with Avatar. However, there's another synergy with Healing Static, which is you can get a second Thunderclap off by hitting someone with your first one with your level 4 talent. Meaning, let's say there's 2 melee people, which is usually about how many you're actually going to hit with your Thunderclap. That means you're healing for 10% on the initial hit and 10% on the repeat hit, which means that you are effectively healing for 20% of your max health. 20% of your max health that's increased by an extra 1,000, which means you're healing for an extra 200 health from this one talent right here, and effectively healing for an extra 300 health from these right here, making it to where he's one of the hardest tanks to kill in the game, and he has probably the highest health in the game and the highest self-healing in the game because of this amount of healing that he gets from the Avatar bonus. And it scales really well too, so he gets brutal. Not to mention at level 20 you can rewind all of these things. Well, you can't rewind this or his Avatar, but you can rewind his W to where he gets 2 more W heals off, and you can rewind his stun as his jumps if needed. Overall, Muradin is probably the tankiest tank in the game, and he still has an engage and a disengage. He can jump in aggressively, and if his team doesn't follow, he can jump out. He's just a powerful tank that fits a lot of scenarios. So let's get into a pro game where we can watch some Muradin play. Zugrug is playing Muradin in this game, and Zugrug is one of my favorite Muradins. If you want to check out Zugrug, there's another one that I really like who plays Muradin a lot on Method named Arcaner. In fact, I wanted to show an Arcaner game because Arcaner's win rate on Muradin is, in HCC mid-season brawl, it was something like, I'm going to say like 75%. The problem is the replay system in MSB was a little buggy, so I wasn't able to get any of his replays from that. So this is a little bit of an older replay, but I still really like Zugrug on Muradin. So in the beginning of most pro play, as we see, they group up. They don't want to die alone. So we can see that they've shifted things around. Part of the reason they shifted things around a little bit was they had more control over the top lane, as a lot of people in pro play will adjust it. Instead of doing the 4v4 bot, they will adjust it around to where they have an advantage in their 4 lane, and it makes it a little bit easier for them to get certain things. You can see that Muradin is already looking to grant vision. It's kind of the anchoring that we've seen before. We'll also see that Muradin plays to follow up a lot of stuns. So you'll see that Roots he'll follow up with an extra stun in case people wanted to do it. And in the early game, it's all about stacking up. He's going the Q build because they already have a tankier person on their team. So you can see he's not going with Third Wind. Third Wind's usually picked up in a lot of scenarios. The reason why Third Wind's picked up is because you can counter poke really easily. because they poke your team down. You take all of the skill shots from a Chromie or from a Junkrat or something like that, and then you back up a little bit and you heal all of your life back very, very quickly. However, if you're not in a situation where you need to worry about that, for this team that they have, they are all in. So he decided to go with Perfect Storm, increasing the amount of Stormbolt damage he does to the enemy heroes. And this is the main reason why they decided to make their initial push top, because they knew that they could push with the objective first and get this this camp, and they would be able to take both sides. They then were able to take this one, and they immediately have full control over the map. Grabbing the top camp and the bottom camp was very powerful, and you can see how Muradin plays very aggressive in this by always pushing really far forward. His first objective is definitely in their favor. You can see that he's essentially showing vision in this area, as well as he's getting in the area to where he can jump over. His whole team is really based off of ganking their solo laner. You can see they do it very effectively. He missed a Q, but the Q that he missed was essentially if the Diablo were to leave, it was in the only direction that he left, but he tossed it a wee bit early, which is fine. It happens. Even the pro players, you remember, you guys have these pro players who've got nerves and a lot of stuff's going on. So the Genji's trying to roam. You can see when pros play Braxis, it's really fun to watch because everyone's roaming back and forth. And it's not just 4 people sitting in a lane forever. It's both teams are roaming back and forth. But you can see he's trying to stop the rotations from other teams. So he notices that they're already up here. So he's trying to stop the rotation in this way. And he's trying to also make it to where the enemies, if they try to rotate up, they're going to get killed. So now they have to take the long rotation path. Now the long rotation path means they need to go all the way up over here, or even possibly just full recall all the way back and go in from there. So it allows him to really get in there, and they all decide to take the aggressive path too, which is really awesome. You'll see he's getting stacks off. He does go with the Thunderburn, which means at level 13 he's going to go for that % health heal. He took just about all of his health. It's killed off. So they probably played a little too aggressive in there, but the reason they did it was because they wanted to burn down the Ragnaros' trait so that they would still have an aggressive push going in. They knew that if they could even lose a death or two here, early deaths are not as important as towers, as an early death's only like 100 experience, but an early tower down is 250 experience. So they knew that even if they died here, they could still get closer to downing off the towers. And going into Ragnaros, it's kind of difficult to do anything about that. So, back to the Muradin, we can see that he is just helping them out with a camp. And his camp clear is pretty weak, especially if you don't get the talent level 4 that increases his damage to minions and mercs, which is kind of more of a Hero League build rather than anything else. So what he did there was he initiated with a Q, and it wasn't anything that his team was going to follow up on, but the Malfurion did essentially throw a root out there because Malfurion knew that if they did want to follow up on that stun, the root would assist and make sure that the stun would be able to be followed up on. However, it was just on a Diablo. They didn't want to do anything there. You can see his positioning is always in front of his team whenever they're backing up or engaging in. But at the same time, he's always trying to get a flank. And one thing that's cool about Muradin is he's one of the few main tanks who can flank. What I said about that is, like, with Blaze, I always said that he's the best flanking tank in the game. Not just because that's a fun alliteration, but I guess it's not really an alliteration, but it's just a fun way to say it. But Muradin can flank as a main tank because he can jump in from the side, he can jump over walls, he can stun people, and his cooldown of his Dwarf Toss is only 10 seconds. So he can jump in, reduce his damage by damage taken by 25%, and still be able to usually survive and get out, especially when he gets his later healing. Level 7, we see the talent that's picked up is Give Him the Axe. I didn't explain too much about this, but effectively, it makes it to where if you have another tank on your team or really strong CC, it allows him to add a lot of damage to the fight. You can see him critting for 174 with only his own CC. However, there's a lot of CC in this team comp that you're going to be seeing that is going to add to this. Like the Root, look at how much crit damage he's doing. This makes it to where he's not just a main tank that can be added for being one of the tankiest tanks in the game, but he's also a tank that can add a lot of damage and potential as well. So we kind of see him where he can follow up a root and he can add easily an extra 500 or 600 damage to the fight.
and we can see him adding his own crit damage just by following up his own Q and slow, because his Dwarf Toss later stuns and his Q stuns, as well as this only decreases attack speed, but there's a talent you can get. I don't think he gets any of these other talents. He still gets just the regular pro build. The only thing that he changed up in his build is the Perfect Storm, increasing the damage, and we can see that Perfect Storm is already doing 35 extra damage. And the main reason why he got this is because their team didn't have enough poke to make the third wind even viable. They're a very heavy engaged team, so him staying in the back trying to heal up would only really be bad against their team, purely because they're only going to be jumping in head first. So he wants to be able to take him out head first. So say, for example, their Genji dives in. Instead of him trying to like survive with healing from the Genji, instead he wants to just be able to like two-shot the Genji with his large burst. So you can see he's taking a lot of damage here, but that's essentially the point of what you want to do with Muradin, is you want to take all the damage for your team because it's easy for you to heal it with your passive, as well as at level 13, it's easy to heal it from your W, and level 16, it's easy to heal it with your trait activatable. So we see him just pretty much healing up the damage that he took for his team, and they're playing safe around this because they don't want to be launched into their team with the trap. However, you can see again, Muradin going for the anchoring. He's waiting to see if the enemies are rotating. They're not. They took the safe path with rotation, so Muradin decides to use his jump. Maiev uses her jump. They both get over here, take back the objective. And another reason why I like Muradin, especially for this map, is because of his ability to rotate very easily. He can jump over any of these walls, so he can take a better rotational path. You can see the anchoring allows it to where he can join the team to attack, deal some extra damage, but he can also watch and make sure that the team isn't trying to invade in this direction. When he realized that all the enemies were missing, he kind of just backed off so he could speed this up a little bit because he didn't see him coming down. Simply stunned off the only person who could actually stop the camp from being picked up, and he adds a lot of damage to the camp. We see that Avatar is picked up, and whenever I do this and I talk about why the pros are playing Muradin in the Discord or anything else, a lot of people will say, well, why is Haymaker never picked up? And to where I'll say, oh, well, Haymaker's Playmaker, right, guys? Haymaker's one of those where it can be great, but it only works if the enemies are making really bad decisions, because you either need to jump behind the enemies and Haymaker them into your team, which the only person that should be in the position that you can Haymaker is their tank. If you Haymaker Diablo, he's just going to Q into you and get himself out again, which makes it to where there's effectively not really the best opportunity to be using Haymaker. So we usually want Muradin to be able to stay in there, take all the heat from the team, take all the damage from the team, and be able to pop Avatar and just heal through all of the damage and get out alive. Because if everyone wastes all of their abilities trying to kill a Muradin who can't die, then he's done his job way more than a single Haymaker would have done. But as we can see, he engaged without using Dwarf Toss. He was allowed to use Dwarf Toss right back out. And in the current meta of us seeing Garrosh and Diablo constantly flipping the main tanks, we see Muradin coming back into the meta even more so than he was before, purely because he can just jump right back out. Diablo and Garrosh have kind of forced Arthas out of the meta because Arthas has no escape. Once they flip him over and they get stunned or root or anything like that, there's no way for them to get back out. So we see Muradin and Joanna's and other tanks that have some way of getting out just coming back into the meta over and over and over, purely because they can out-survive all of this extra stuff. You see Muradin taking an aggressive route here because he can stop any of the rotations from top or bot, or at least get vision on him, and he always has the capability of jumping away from the enemies if needed. You can see a lot of pings happening. It looks like Team Freedom likes to communicate with pings, as they're all essentially playing out an aggressive playstyle. They want to jump in, they want to get something going, they want to have a really strong fight early on. We see a Planet Cracker, and this is actually one of my favorite combos right here. Not a lot of people talk about this, but when people pick a Ragnaros to play the defensive on Braxis, having a Phoenix just do one single Planet Cracker can melt the majority of this Ragnaros ult very quickly. We see a nice combo happening in, and I believe I did this same
game for the why the pros play Maiev. So if you want to see this example for Maiev as well, I believe it is the same game that I used for this one, Team Freedom versus Team Octalysis. But you can see just how aggressive he is, just anchoring the bushes. He's jumping in. He's taking all the damage. You saw he took all of the Q damage from Junkrat, and he's already healed himself back up to full health. He's playing aggressive. He's just watching the bushes, watching the rotations, making sure that the Genji can't get too much value off of any of these rotations. Now he got the Thunderclap heals on % health. Now you can see as it reverberated, as it Thunderburned, these two still need to have their names flipped, by the way. It's just something dumb. But as it did its second hit, you can see that the second hit also healed for a percentage of his health. And they're able to take out Diablo. Diablo's saved by the palm. But their entire team's still full health. And the entire team's still full health because everyone keeps hitting this Muradin, who just keeps getting healed back up. So it's just really, he's just a wall that just sits in front of the entire enemy team, and the enemy team can't do anything about it. They can play super aggressive despite them being on similar levels. I mean, the experience contribution in this game has been pretty similar. They're playing very safe. They're holding their own. Even on Braxis, which is considered a very snowbally map, they're definitely holding their own. And it's just one of those things that he can really hold his own on. Both teams can hold their own if they're playing really well, and a Ragnaros really helps at holding your own because you can lose the objective and clear it very quickly. So I just love the way that both these teams are playing this map. It's just a really cool way. Now this is a mistake I called out in the other game as well. This is an extremely risky play that they did without their team really being there. Now they have Planet Cracker available, so we may see something cool happen here, but I still think it's a very risky thing. Pays off a little bit. We see that he's aggressively taking a lot of damage. You can see this. He took all the damage for his team right there. He took everything from Genji. He took everything from Junkrat. He took everything from Ragnaros. And he just pops Avatar. He's healing himself with Ws. He's healing himself through all of this damage. And not even needing to worry about just about anything in this entire fight. Even though I personally thought that this was a mistake made by their team because they didn't know where any of the enemies were, as well as their full team wasn't really there with them. So they get 2 kills out of it because of the amazing play from this Muradin to just soak up all the damage, but they still end up losing the Maiev in that fight. So it worked out for him purely because this Muradin played it so well. He absorbed so much damage in that fight by just standing in front of everything that that they were able to win a fight that ultimately probably wasn't the best. But Team Freedom knows Zugrug. They know who's good on this team. And they knew that if Zugrug was calling something out and jumping in with the Maiev, that they needed to get there and they needed to follow up because they knew that he had this capability of surviving all of this. All in all, it's a powerful team to know the people on your team that have the strengths. And I think that's really what they did best about this. In this scenario, he's simply just getting vision. He's trying to just hold this on his own, but they don't have their team there, so he doesn't want to really fight on a 2v5, essentially. He doesn't want to fight a 2v5. Instead, he wants to fight with his entire team and get as much value out of things as they can. They need to clear up this camp, but if they all show up top, they're going to lose bot. So they're waiting until the enemies show in more situations. As they can see that there's still a ton of people up top. They're going to let Dahaka just kind of push on his own. Hopefully Dahaka can get a little bit of value out of it. And they are going to have to answer this. So that is what TF is looking for right now, is just an answer. We'll see that Dahaka is getting a lot of damage in here. We see that this is kind of a big problem that we have with a lot of Muradins in QM. Is a lot of Muradins would jump back here and they would get on this Junkrat and they would follow him around trying to kill this Junkrat. We've got a 60% health Junkrat. We would see Muradins just focus everything. Well, the problem is Muradin alone doesn't have enough damage to kill Junkrat. So instead, we see him take this really awesome position where he jumps in between the Dahaka and everyone on the enemy team, meaning that he's going to start taking all of the Junkrat damage right here, all of the Qs from the Genji, giving Dahaka time to heal up, giving Dahaka time to get out of the fight, hopefully taking all of this damage. We see that he already has
all of his healing abilities ready. So he should be able to tank all this damage. Unfortunately, it wasn't enough to save the Dahaka, but it was enough for his team to take an aggressive stance in this fight. And a lot of people would have made the mistake of just jumping in the back line, but unfortunately the Dahaka would have died, the Maiev would have been taking way too much damage, and instead now he's taken all the damage and he'll be able to heal it up with the passive as well as with the Malfurion heal. All because he took a more defensive position as opposed to the Hero League super aggressive position. And great dodge by the Kharazim. He was able to dodge back, avoid the Q, and then jump to his team. Very good for them. And they go right over and they start taking the objective. He's playing aggressive, just trying to avoid vision, which they did end up getting vision of him. And he's just trying to play in here. Again, it's just very aggressive play style. He's just getting some stuns off. And he's taking so much damage, but it doesn't really matter because look at this. Pops Avatar, pops his W, or he was going to pop his W. He used his E. Does a W. There's 5% of his health. He walks away, healing from the passive. Now, one thing to know, guys. He went with Dwarf Launch instead of Stone Form, which means he's not as tanky as he was before, but did it ever feel like he was about to die? Like, he's sitting there with one death from a really aggressive play. He's been taking so much damage this game, and he just doesn't really need that issue. So he bumped up the Dwarf Toss range and its cooldown. This allows him to jump into an aggressive position and have 7 seconds before he can jump out and always be able to jump out really well. It's definitely an awesome play. If you're a solo tank, though, you'll see that a lot of times Stone Form will pick up more often so you can tank even more damage. But as we see, he doesn't really care about that because he has Dahaka to tank a lot of the damage. So he's been going with a more aggressive play, as his Q is now doing an extra 85 damage. And against someone like a Genji, that's a lot of damage. See him just stun one person. Everyone backs up. So they're winning these objectives one by one, and they don't really need to worry about too much in here. Because, again, every time they're pretty much winning it. I'm surprised they didn't go for a boss play here. But again, boss is always a throw, so he simply just goes for vision, making sure that the enemies don't go for it. They take the safer route here. Even though they were above on a talent tier at the time, they are now on even talent tiers, so it was the safe path. Now, this is a risky play. He doesn't know how many people are in here. Because you got to remember, he was doing the same thing that Diablo could have been doing. He was sitting right here, and Diablo likely was sitting right here, just waiting for the vision. So he stacks up, and again, look at this. He could jump out if he wants to, but instead of jumping out, he simply pops his avatar. Why? Because the enemies are all clustered, and because they're so clustered, all he needs to do is keep them clustered here for long enough that Maiev can get a nice combo right in here. And if Maiev can get a nice combo, it's a winning fight. So instead of him jumping out, he simply just does an avatar. He does his W, gets some nice huge heals. I mean, he's healing for a ton right now. 5% of 7,500 health. That is a 350 health heal on every hero in the range, which is 2 different heroes right now that he hit with the first W, and the repeat of it will hit one more person. It's just an incredible amount of healing. He took all this damage so that his Maiev could get this full combo on him. Just a lot of value out of this. We see Maiev jumping in one more time for a nice W, one-shotting most of their team, and that's all that was needed. He's able to jump out aggressively and push ahead. He wants to take this and get it into a keep and get it to a win. So his aggressive play enabled Maiev to be able to do enough damage to take out the team. And it's just this is kind of what you want to be doing with Muradin. You want to be jumping in front of the damage. You want to be out healing and out sustaining just about everything, getting giant health pools, and then really just pushing far ahead into these fights. The mistake that you see that is essentially a mistake you see in Hero League that you never really see, and I might end up doing a 4 mistakes video with Muradin, is that a lot of people will jump aggressively into their back line and think that they can get kills by themselves. He never does that. The only time that he jumps aggressively into the back line is when the rest of his team jumps aggressively into the back line. However, you never see him do it alone into the back line. You always see him jumping into a into damage that the enemy team is doing. For example, we saw him jumping in front of Junkrat's Qs the entire game. And you saw that the Junkrat never really did any damage to anyone but Muradin, purely because Muradin was always getting in the way of everyone else, making it to where their Junkrat was essentially useless this entire game. He never really applied enough damage to any target to make it valuable, which made it to where Genji never got people low enough to where they could follow up with a kill. And all of this combined makes it to where this Muradin essentially disabled two of the enemy heroes at the same time, purely on his own great play by himself. And that's what you want to be looking for with Muradin. Getting in positions where the enemies can't do anything. They can't get enough damage to set up for any kills. And you can just out-heal it and out-survive it with all of the abilities that you're doing. Ultimately, Zugrug plays an amazing Muradin, and if you get the chance, also check out Arcaner in the Methods team. He is an amazing Muradin as well, with something like a 75% win rate on Muradin. These two players are ones that you really want to watch on Muradin all the time. So feel free to check those out. Also, check out some of my other videos. I've got Why the Pros Play for a lot of the main heroes that the pros have been playing lately, as well as I've got 4 mistake videos and a variety of other videos. So if you like this, check out my other ones. Feel free to subscribe. And as always, I love to hear your feedback on a lot of these videos. I'm working on improving on a lot of them, getting better editing, better things here and there with other videos. The Why the Pros Play, most people have told me that they like it exactly how it is, so I've been kind of keeping it that way, but I am trying to speed it up a little bit. As you saw, the first few Why the Pros Plays that I did were nearing an hour long. These ones I try to keep it around 20 to 30 minutes, just covering the main things that they did in this game to make a difference just on their play alone. So overall, that's really what I wanted to show. Thank you so much for watching, and again, feel free to check out some of my other videos.